So the topic for tonight that we're going to chat through is a leadership talk, which is all about reproducing yourself. And the goal is, the bottom line for the whole message that I'm going to share this training is actually to reproduce yourself through apprenticeship to empower others. Okay, reproduce yourself through apprenticeship to empower others. That is what we're going to cover. That's the takeaway for this evening. I wanted to call it replace yourself, but replace yourself seems quite violent or can seem quite negative. So rather use the word to reproduce yourself. And we're going to look at two areas in the Old Testament that we can learn this from. Okay, so we're going to have a look at Nehemiah. In Nehemiah chapter 13, it's a wonderful passage of scripture, and the sort of what we learn from Nehemiah in his life, and even in Nehemiah chapter 13, is that there is no success without a successor. There is no success without a successor. That in the areas of leadership, that we are called to continue to reproduce ourselves, to reproduce leaders. When husband and wife come together, there's reproduction that happens, right? And it's healthy and all that. When we are as leaders growing and we want things to grow and go beyond us, we have to continue to reproduce ourselves. And so a lot of you would have already been hearing talk through all of the staff team and that about 2 ICs, how we're trying to focus on getting 2 ICs at every level of our church organization, so that we can, through apprenticeship, empower other people for ministry and empower other people for service. And so with Nehemiah, we see that there is no success without a successor. See here, Roxy's in the waiting room and struggling to join. Is Roxy jumped in? Okay.
Yeah, looks like she's just jumped.
Awesome.
Yeah,
cool. Thank you. So with us, there's no success without a successor. So in Nehemiah chapter 13, what we find is that Nehemiah has done an incredible work in Judah, with one of the kingdoms, because the kingdom was split and they were all exported to Babylon and that. And so Nehemiah gets it on his heart in in the book of Nehemiah, to go and rebuild the wall around Jerusalem, so that community can find safety, because it was God's city that was in ruins. And so he wanted to bring safety and security. So he goes, and within some sort of record, I think it's in 52 days, plus or minus, they rebuild this wall against all sorts of opposition. And after a couple of years, Nehemiah goes back to the king of Babylon. And he kind of makes sure that everything is running. While he is away, he hears reports about things that are falling apart. And I just want to read some of that. It says in verse 6 of chapter 13, "But while all was going on, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had returned to the king. Sometime later, I asked for his permission and came back to Jerusalem. Here I learned about the evil thing Eliashib had done in providing Tobiah a room in the courts of the house of God." So what he did was, this guy emptied out the storeroom of the Lord, emptied out the granary, emptied out like space within the temple, to give this guy Tobiah a place to live within the temple or within the house of the Lord, which was like that was a big no-no, right? Then further on it says, "I also learned the portions assigned to the Levites had not been given to them." And what happened was, because they weren't being provided for in the house of the Lord, the Levites went on to go and back to their own fields to do farming and to try and make a living, because God had instituted that the Levites were to be always ministering before the Lord, and that they would receive sort of their survival through the rest of the tribes. Then it goes on to say in verse 15, "In those days I saw," he had returned, "I saw in Judah treading winepress on the Sabbath and bringing in grain and loading it on donkeys together with wine, grapes, figs, and all other loads. And he was asking them, why do you desecrate the Sabbath day? Then another place, he sees the men of Judah who had married the woman from other nations. And in the Old Testament, God said there will be no intermarriage, because as soon as you start intermarrying with other tribes or with other nations around you, you're going to fall into idol worship, which is exactly what happened. And so you can see what we see here is that he had gone away and he had left things as they were. And what happened was, when the leader is away, people tend to stray. That's what John Maxwell says. When the leader is away, people tend to stray, which means with the absence of good leadership, the community fell into chaos. They were compromising their companionship. There was financial mismanagement. They secularized the Sabbath. There was no longer a holy day for them. They worked on the day. And then there was disobedience through intermarriage and all that. And so Nehemiah, when he comes back, he throws a big hissy fit and he corrects all these things, because there was nobody there who was actively leading the people in what God was calling them to do. And this kind of highlights a law of thermodynamics, a second law of thermodynamics, which is things don't wind up, they wind down unless energy is applied. Things don't wind up, they wind down, which means in the absence of good leadership, things don't get better, they get worse. Another way of saying is that anything that's left to itself unwinds, it loses energy. And in order to tighten up and to bring structure and to bring all those things, you have to apply energy through leadership. And so what is vital for us to understand is that the role of leaders is essential. It's absolutely essential for things to keep on improving and getting better and building what it is that God wants to build. But Nehemiah, he also has to now return, right? He can't stay in Jerusalem, and he's going to return. But what he does is he's learned from his lesson. He's learned from all the mistakes, and he's then put in the right kind of leaders. Nehemiah develops others to carry on the good work that he had started. Because what a pity it is to build something amazing, but then it can't continue. Imagine when Jesus said, hey, to the disciples, hey, go ahead and, build my church and, heal the sick, preach the gospel. But within 2 generations, they failed to raise up leaders, reproduce themselves in discipleship. The Christianity would have just fallen away, right? We've seen it in a negative context throughout Israel's history, that when people stopped following God, the leaders stopped leading as followers of God, the nation would descend into chaos. So leadership needs to happen in developing other people like Nehemiah is going to do, so that the good work can be carried on. I would love it in our church and in our lives that the good work that we start, another generation or other people can actually build upon that good work, that it would be a foundation. I love the analogy of the quote of success looks like using the previous generation as a platform, as a foundation, so that the next generation can see further, reach further, do more. I know that's the heart of parents even. In Nehemiah 13:13, Nehemiah starts to put the right kind of leaders in place so that the work can carry on. It says, I put Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and a Levite named Pedaiah in charge of the storerooms, and made Hanan, son of Zaccur, the son of Mattaniah, their assistant, because they were considered trustworthy. They were made responsible for distributing the supplies to their fellow Levites. Just checking, I think somebody's dropping in. So in order for the work to carry on, without Nehemiah's direct oversight, he had to put the right kinds of leaders in place and put a few leaders in place. So he reproduced himself to carry on the work. He empowered people to lead. He gave them authority. He gave them responsibility, right, in order to continue to lead. And I love this word empower, because empower, you could think it has all sorts of connotations and meanings. Empower simply means this on the very basic level: giving power away, giving power away. The world wants to hold on to power, but the way of the kingdom is actually to release power to other people. That, for instance, discipleship and church building, all that happens at the very beginning levels. It's not reserved for the elite few, but it's for everyone. And so we want to make sure that we keep empowering people. Nehemiah empowered people, gave them the authority, the power to do something, but they also had the responsibility that they would have to answer if things didn't go right. So power was given away. And empowering is, as hopefully some of you will know, is empowering is part of one of our life-giving values at Revived Church, that we want to be a people who are empowering. We're giving power away. We're giving, and that's why we train and equip so that we can keep helping you and other people to grow in what God's given them and to make a difference in the world. If we just hold on to that on the staff or a few lay leaders, it's never going to work. We want to give as much of it away as possible. And so that's why it's such an important value for us, because we empower people through prayer, that we win the battle in the spiritual before we win it in the natural. We speak life, which means we build other people up through life-giving words. That's how we empower people. We speak well of them. We speak them up. And through servanthood, and the reality is that we don't raise volunteers. We release ministers. Our call, our mandate as Revived Church, one of them is to empower ministers. I know that volunteerism is a very popular word, but when I look in the kingdom, I think the right word is servanthood. They were called to give our life away for the King, and we're called to be empowered and equipped in those roles so that God would receive the glory, people would get help, there'd be great impact. And so we look at everyone who serves in our church and as a minister, and people who are coming into our church as potential, as future ministers being released in the kingdom. But when it comes to what Nehemiah is doing, Nehemiah is reproducing himself. He's empowering leaders around him so that the work can carry on. And this is actually the acid test of leadership. This is the test. Can we reproduce our leadership in someone else? Can you reproduce your leadership in someone else? Now, you know, some people might think that, so does that mean I have to make copies of myself? No, you don't make copies of yourself. You also don't raise someone up that's going to take your place necessarily. Instead of thinking of it in that way, I like to think of it in a family context. You know, when we have children, we've reproduced. There's someone who is like us, but they have their very own personality, their very own gifting, and all of that. And so what we want to do is we want to impart values, we want to impart vision, we want to impart culture, and then we want to give them the ability to make their own decisions. It's the same way when we think about reproducing our leadership within the kingdom of God, that we want to impart things onto people, that they can be who God's called them to be, but they understand our heart, they understand our vision, our values, they understand our ways, they understand what the end goal is, all of that. But we're always constantly bringing people in. The family grows when there's new children. The work grows when there's new leaders. And the tension can be, and I think sometimes it's a blockage. We think that, hey, if we raise up people around me, they will maybe replace my skill. Or I like to be the person who is known as Mr. Get It Right. Or, you know, I'm always the one who does this job. And as soon as somebody else rises up who can now do that job, the spotlight's going to be off me and it's going to be on them. It's a very fear-driven thing. It actually comes out of insecurity. The truth is that if you allow people to rise up around you and actually actively bring people along the journey, the spotlight hasn't moved from you onto them, because the spotlight should always be on Jesus. But what we're doing is we're actually enabling ourselves to either take on the next thing that God's got for us, or to be a person who can be trustworthy in raising up great people around us. And in that way, releasing them into the things of God. On the other hand, it's secure kingdom leaders that empower other people around them to become leaders too. When you can be secure that, hey, I'm going to do my best to empower people, reproduce leaders around me, so that I can multiply impact. Because the more leaders we have, the more we can do, the more impact we can have. As a leader, you can now become more focused on your unique contribution. You know, when you don't have leaders around you, you do everything. But the more leaders you raise around you, the more you can actually give jobs away and to focus on the thing that uniquely you're there for. It builds legacy, builds something bigger than ourselves, keeps the work going, and shares the load. It shares the load. So how do we reproduce ourselves? It's a good question. And Tommy, I'm so thankful that you asked. And probably for some of you, you guys are already gifted and doing well in this, and I appreciate it. What we're going to look at is in the other part of the Old Testament, we're going to look at the accounts of Elijah and Elisha, how Elijah was called by God to recruit Elisha, to be his servant, to train him, who will one day replace Elijah when he went to be with the Lord. And that's just an important point for us to consider, that when we are reproducing ourselves in leaders, reproducing leadership in others, and we're bringing other leaders around us, you know, people leave, people move on, people move, you know, people step out of one role and into another role. And if we leave roles vacant, pretty much what happens is that thing unwinds. And so we want to keep a sort of a healthy family, a growing family of leaders around us. So Elijah, you can see this in 1 Kings 19 and 2 Kings 2. God tells Elijah, listen, Elijah, I need you to go and appoint Elisha as the next person, as the next prophet. And I just want to share with you 5 things, and we'll read the scriptures there. So number 1, God desires to continually raise up leaders. God desires to continually raise up leaders. That's why he says in verse 19, go and anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel Meholah, to succeed you as prophet. We see even in the life of Jesus, raising leaders around him. We see throughout the scriptures, leaders being raised up by God. Not that leadership is the ultimate gift. That's not it. But through leaders, we actually direct people and help people to grow. The second thing of how so number 1 here, God desires to continually raise up leaders. And what I'm calling our church leaders to do, our leadership team, everybody in this call, is to have it on our minds to reproduce your leadership into the life of somebody else. How can we keep bringing other people on the leadership journey? And this looks like not leading life group by yourself, not leading a ministry team by yourself, but actually having it in mind, hey, I want to find someone else that I can build into and empower to lead either the next team or this team or at a church plant or something along those lines. And it's not your responsibility to teach someone everything. It's impossible to teach someone everything. What our responsibility is as leaders is simply to empty our cup, not to fill someone else's. We just call to teach them what we know, not everything that there is to know. So our responsibility is to empty our cup, not to fill theirs. The second thing on how to reproduce ourselves is that the leader finds and challenges the potential leader. So let's have a look at it in 1 Kings 19:19. It says, so Elijah went from there and found Elisha, son of Shaphat. He was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen, and he himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him and threw his coat around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. Let me kiss my father and my mother goodbye, he said, and then I will come back with you. What we see Elijah doing, I always get confused between the two, Elijah and Elisha. But what we see him doing is throwing his coat. His coat was his mantle. That was how he was recognized as a prophet. And so when Elijah throws this mantle around Elisha, he's very clearly saying, come and follow me. He's clearly saying, I want to train you. And so he finds Elisha and he challenges him to leave what he is doing, to leave his family business in order to come and follow him in a life of full-time ministry. I mean, what a call to have, and what a challenge to put before someone. And Elisha's even like, oh, flip, okay, let me just go say goodbye to my parents first. And Elijah's bringing him to this thing of like, think about what I'm asking you to do, because there's a weight to it. And you know that, I can't remember exactly where it is in scripture now, but it was said that Elisha washed the hands of Elijah. Basically, what Elijah was calling him to do, to become, was an executive assistant, to do the grunt work, to do the dirty work, but so that he could learn and develop. And it didn't take a year. It took many, many years, I think more than 10 years to develop this call. And so what does that mean for us as leaders? It means having a lookout, to the people in our world, the people that we have relationship with, the people in our team, and to see somebody who's got some potential that you think, hey, that person can be a leader. That person can run a team or do this. It's to actually go and have a personal conversation with them and have an I see in you conversation. I see in you that you have this potential to become a great life group leader one day. And I would love the opportunity for you to learn. And I want to invite you to be my assistant, to help us to lead this group. And then one day we can start a new group and you can take the new group as, for example. But we have to be intentional about it. Even Jesus was intentional about it. He noticed the people around him and he personally invited them, not just to follow, but to be fishers of men, right? So we actually have to challenge people to rise up. The third thing of how we reproduce ourselves is that the potential leader counts the cost, pays the price, and follows. The truth is that in order to lead, we have to sacrifice. We sacrifice other time, energy, maybe sometimes even some finances. But in order to lead, it's part of that is sacrifice. In fact, I think it's John Maxwell who says that in order to go up, you have to give up. The law of sacrifice, that to go further in your leadership or go further in your career, you have to make sacrifices along the way. And that's not just for leaders, that's for disciples, right? Discipleship comes at a cost. Leadership comes at a cost. And so there might be people of potential around, but if they're unwilling to sacrifice time, energy, or whatever, they're not willing to pay the price. Appointing them as an assistant is never going to work. It's never going to bring growth, and you're going to be frustrated. So we actually have to ask people, hey, rise up to this challenge. There's something in you. They have to be able to say, okay, cool, I will do whatever I can. And obviously there's capacity and there's limitations. I get all of that. So we're not saying quit your job but can you squeeze a bit of time? Can you do an hour of prep a week? Something like that. The fourth thing is the potential leader stays close to and shadows the leader. So for us as leaders, in order for potential leaders to be around, this is what we learn through Elisha and Elijah. Let's read it quick. It says, Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. Let me kiss my father and my mother goodbye, and I will come with you. Go back, Elijah replied. What have I done to you? So Elisha left them, went back. He took his yoke of oxen, slaughtered them, burned the plow equipment and cooking the meat, and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah to become his servant. Here you can see the cost that he was willing to pay. Now, not all of us are going to be required to pay that kind of price to burn all your farming equipment to make sure you never go back. But there is always a sacrifice and there is always a cost. But we see in 2 Kings, the 2 Kings 2, where I'm not going to read it, but basically Elijah is about to go to heaven. And Elisha knows about this. And Elijah says to Elisha, okay, you stay here. I'm going to go somewhere further. And he does this a few times, but Elisha's response is, no, I am going to follow you. I am coming with you. And it's that sense of a potential leader needs to be in a place where they can learn, they can grow, they can see what we're doing, which means as leaders, we need to be relationally available. We need to be able to show them and train them and coach them. We can't raise up leaders. We can't reproduce our leadership in other people if we're not available to other people. Maybe it's a coffee every now and then. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's some text messages. Maybe it's just a training every now and then. But there needs to be proximity and there needs to be a relationship so that people can go on the journey right with us. If people aren't willing to do the journey, they can't rise up as leaders. If we're not willing to do the journey with them, then they don't rise up as leaders. That's why even this story of Elisha following Elijah, becoming his servant, or even in the case of Jesus and his disciples, it's doing life with those that you see potential in. It doesn't mean that you have to be best friends, and it doesn't mean that you have to spend every waking minute of every day with them, but just being available and having them close enough so that they can see and learn and grow. I hope this is making sense so far. We're almost at the end. Number 5 is to reproduce the burden and vision for potential leaders. Now, this is not from this passage of scripture, but what this means in reproducing ourselves, to reproduce the burden and vision for potential leaders is simply this. Everybody in the body of Christ and everybody in the world, we're different. You know, it's very clear that I'm not like Graham or Jenny. You know, we're different. All of the leaders that have ever been raised up around Graham and Jenny are very, very, very different. All of our leaders are very, very, very different. And what we need to have is space for people to be themselves, space for people to exert their own gifts, talents, and abilities. But what we have to do as leaders is reproduce the burden and vision. It's giving people a strong why. This is why we do what we do. Why do we do what we do? We do what we do because we believe God for revival in our city, that marriages can be restored, that there can be revival throughout the city, people going from spiritual death to spiritual life, addicts coming free from their addictions, people being healed, people coming alive to God. We believe for revival in our city. We want to see people, I want to help people find life and purpose through Jesus. Everything that we do has to lead people to Jesus and has to train people how to follow Jesus. That's our call. Preach Jesus, make disciples. That's our strong why. But even on different teams, that's our overarching. But what is the purpose? What's the strong why of your group? To bring community, to create discipleship. Nobody does life alone, right? We only grow in the context of relationship. Let's make sure we have healthy ones. And then give them a clear what. This is what I want you to do. You know, I've done it in the past where I've brought leaders around me and kind of just expected people to figure it out. And in some ways that's good. And in some ways it's not so good, because then you get confused and you do whatever seems right to you, but it's not actually adding to what you're trying to achieve. And so a strong why, which is vision. Why do I set up chairs on a Sunday morning? Why do I clean my house for life group on a Thursday night? What is that strong why? And then a clear what is like, this is the expectation. Just setting the expectation already gives people direction. Let them figure out how to do it. That's where they can apply all their gifts, talents, and abilities, strategy, thinking, all of that to add into the mix. And then you multiply yourself in that way. So the last thing is this. Who do we empower? Who do we empower? Great, Swen, that's amazing. I'm going to go and I'm going to, reproduce myself. I'm going to get 2 ICs. I'm going to raise people up. around me. I'm going to have an intentional conversation with someone. But who should that be? I want to offer you only 4 things. A filter, so to speak, of who you should approach. Number 1, because we're a church, someone who loves God and loves people. Like, that's their highest priority, that they're actually willing to be a disciple of Jesus. If someone is a new believer and you're not convinced that they love God or that they love people, maybe they love God, but there is a process of loving people. Like, you invite people for the next level of leadership if they love God and love people, because then what they do is out of a conviction and is an overflow of that relationship. The second thing is character. In leadership, character is vital. Listen, as a believer in Christ, character is vital. As a person, character is vital. But so much more, because so much more is expected of leaders. And so what kind of character traits do you think? Well, whatever good character is, but I'd offer just these, that they're trustworthy. Nehemiah looked for trustworthy people. It's people who are responsible. So, hey, if the time for us to rock up is at 7 a.m., I don't rock up at 7:30. I rock up at 5 to 7 because I'm trustworthy, or if it's someone who's responsible, they can't make it to serve or they can't make it to group and they don't let you know. That's not someone who's responsible, right? So it's who's responsible, who's trustworthy, that kind of thing. So character. The third one is chemistry. Chemistry. Do you get along with them? Is it easy or is it hard to get along with the people that you're raising up in leadership? Is it, because if you're going to give your best to someone you enjoy speaking to and being around, it doesn't mean that they have to be like you, think like you, smell like you, talk like you, do the same mannerisms as you, do everything your way. It's not that. It's I think it's Chris Hodges that talks about a divine flow where it's easy to connect with this person. It's easy to teach. I'm happy to spend it. Put it this way, let the filter almost be, I'm happy to have a braai with them for 3 or 4 hours. You know it as much as I do. Sometimes there's people in our world who we love, but we don't want to braai with them for 4 hours. Let the leaders we raise up around us and reproduce ourselves in, hey, we've got chemistry with them. And the last one is number 4, is competence. Like, they can actually do the job. They have potential. They have gifting. Now, a lot of that can be in raw form, and new leaders as well as existing leaders, we're all going to mess up at times, and we need grace for that. It's not a call for perfection. But if someone hates kids, please, we don't want to raise them up to be leaders in our kids' church. Or if they're difficult with kids, or someone, for instance, on a frontline team, we want to raise them up to leadership, but they're not very friendly. Like, no, they've got to have some sort of competence in it, right? Have an ability to do the job, or at least there to be potential to do the job. So those are the things. And I believe this as I close, that when we empower others, it takes personal investment of energy and time and sometimes even finances. But what happens is we grow, we help other people fulfill their potential, and we create power within the church, power within the organization, because there is so many more people rising up that can do the work of ministry. And even that, in that, just taking that opportunity to invest ourselves into somebody else to reproduce as leaders, what will happen is that we release something to them so that we're able to take on what God is giving us. Sometimes the end of a season means, how can I give something to somebody that I've trained so that I can say yes to what God wants me to do? I mean, imagine just all of a sudden, if you're serving under someone pulls out of a leadership role and there's a vacuum that gets created. No, we want to spend time so that we go from strength to strength and create strength within the church. And mark my words, the more leaders we will raise up, the more God will bring the right people to our church to become disciples and be raised up into leadership, because he goes, These guys are taking it serious. The vision that God's called us as a church, as Revived Church, the mandate he's put on our church is so much bigger than our current structure and our current team. God wants to do something amazing and powerful in our lives and through our lives, that he gets glory and we get to see him do incredible stuff with our lives. But you know what it's going to take? It's going to take everyone. It's going to take us all to reproduce ourselves so we can see the work of God carry on. I hope that this has been helpful to you guys.